We're a minute past 3. This is the Fargo Planning Commission meeting for September 1st, 2020. I need a motion to approve the order of agenda. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Nobody opposed. All right, I've got a few comments to read. There'll be no Planning Commission brown bag on Wednesday, September 16th. The following items today on today's agenda have been continued to October 6th Planning Commission. Item 3, Austin's subdivision conditional use permit. And items 6A and 6B, zone change and planned unit development located at 1425 Main Avenue. Those will be on the October 6th agenda. So let's see. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the August 4th meeting. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and second. Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to item 1 on our agenda. A hearing on an application requesting a plat of the Delta addition. Megan.
Good afternoon, Chair and Planning Commission. Delta addition is an application for a minor subdivision. The subject property is located at 1313, 1315, and 1335 University Drive North. Applicant Cole Nessett from Nessett Land Surveys is here if you have any questions. The minor subdivision proposes to replat lots 39, 40, and 41 of subdivision of lot numbers 65, 66, 67, and 68 of Omer subdivision into one lot to accommodate future development of the 3 properties. This one on your left faces northeasterly, and below is the alleyway behind the properties. Staff received 2 inquiries with no noted concern prior to publication of the staff report and 1 inquiry after publication with no noted concern. The Roosevelt Neighborhood Association was also notified and no comments were received. Staff finds that all criteria is met and is recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, any questions for Megan from the commissioners? See no questions?
I'd like to just ask a question.
Yep.
Does that mean that those buildings will be demolished?
I believe in the future, but I'll let applicant Cole Nessett maybe answer that.
I don't think there's any plans right now.
If you're making plans for the future, and that's why this item is on the agenda, you must have some kind of a timeline.
They haven't proposed the site plan for the site.
Thank you.
All right. I could invite the applicant to speak if he would like to, if there's any questions for the applicant or Cole. See no questions. I'd open up for public comment. Anybody from the public wish to speak for or against this application? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any other additional discussion, commissioners? Are we ready to act?
I move to approve with the motion in the staff report.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Holtz. Sherling.
Yes.
Tassa. Morgan.
Aye.
Stoffren.
Aye.
Rosenberg.
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye.
Sobolik.
Aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to item 2, a hearing on the application requesting a conditional use permit to allow an alternative access plan for parking reduction on a portion of lots 2 and 3 and all of lots 4 and 5, block 2, Brunsville First Edition. Megan, please.
Item 2, Brunsdale First Edition and Marydale Edition is a conditional use permit for parking reduction. The property is located at 3001 and 3017 University Drive South. Along with what Commissioner or Chair Gunkelman noted, it also includes a portion of lots 4 and 6 and all of lots 2, 3, and 5, Block 8, Marydale Edition. Applicant Kevin Zachman with Zerberg Architects, I believe, should be attending via phone if you have any questions. The image is on your screen at the top, faces northeasterly from the sidewalk and shows the structure. And at the bottom shows facing west from University Drive South. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit for an alternative access plan to reduce parking on site. The owner, Aldevron, plans to renovate the building and no expansion for this facility is planned at this time. 252 parking spaces are required for the 50,360 square foot facility for medical office research use, which requires 1 space for 200 square feet. The applicant proposes to provide 1 space per 300 square feet, which is consistent with the general office use and would require 168 parking spaces on site. The applicant states that this type of work at the location is similar to the campus location on 40th Avenue South, and the Planning Commission previously approved a conditional use permit for a parking reduction at that location. The applicant states that providing 1 space per 300 square feet will meet the needs of the facility. Staff received 1 inquiry with no noted concern prior to the publication of the staff report and 2 inquiries after publication with no noted concern. One of the recent inquiries was from the Department of Transportation, the North Dakota Department of Transportation, that had no comments on the application. Staff finds that all criteria is met and is recommending approval with the conditions of noted up on your screen.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have it.
All right, Commissioners, any questions for Megan?
Is there, with the other approval we had, have we noticed anything there, or that hasn't been developed yet to know what the parking needs are?
There has been 1 building constructed. I believe they're in the process of some additional construction on the north. I have not heard of any complaints received from the city about parking in that area.
Do we have any other circumstances where a similar a parking reduction in a situation like this?
Not that I'm aware of.
So and do you have confidence that we don't really need all those parking spaces for this development?
Sure. Based on what the applicant states and how that site is used, as well as our traffic engineer, Jeremy Gordon, had a chance to review and agreed with the request by the applicant.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
So Aldevron is, it's a medical facility, did you say? And do they do tests? Is that what their primary business is, or are they actually seeing patients?
I don't believe they have people coming in off the street, but I'll refer to applicant Kevin Zachman for a further description of how they use the facility,
Thank you.
if he is on the phone.
Dawn?
They will be doing some biomanufacturing, similar to what they do on their main campus. So there will not be any public coming to this site.
That's right.
Okay, so does that mean then that there are regular employees that will be using the parking lot every day?
That's correct.
Okay, and you figured out with the number of employees that you have and plan to have in the future that those sites, parking lots sites will be enough?
Yeah, we've worked with Aldevron to figure how many staff would be during the day and throughout their shift work, so that they will have ample parking for their staff with this requirement that we're proposing.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Megan?
So when I look at the plat here, Megan, or the photo of the site, there's a lot of green space on there. So is there expected that they're going to fill in a lot of additional parking spaces into there?
I don't believe, based on how it is today, I don't believe they would need to provide any additional parking. It appears that this structure had I believe was previously used as an office space and appears to have met the general office ratio previously.
It was maintenance engineering corporate offices before this. So. Any other questions for Megan? Any other questions for the applicant? Hearing none, I'll open up for public comment. Anybody from the public wish to comment on this application? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment period. Any additional discussion, commissioners, or are we ready to act? I'm looking for a motion.
I'd like to make a
Dawn.
motion to accept the findings and recommendation of staff and move to approve.
Thank you. I need a second too.
Sure. Second.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote, please.
Schneider.
Aye.
Schurling.
Yes.
Holtz.
Aye.
Sobolik.
Aye.
Stoffren.
Aye.
Morgan.
Aye.
Rosenberg.
Aye.
Tassa.
Aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to item 4. Hearing on an application requesting a plat of the Edgewood Estates Second Edition. Donald, please.
Good evening, Commissioners, or good afternoon, Commissioners. Edgewood Estates Second Edition is a minor subdivision proposed in the excuse me, in the Edgewood Estates subdivision up here in North Fargo. This is Edgewood Golf Course. Elm Street is down off the screen here. This is Parker Place, which surrounds this property on 2 sides. These properties are undeveloped, and this is a fairly straightforward project. This is what the property looks like on the ground there. Again, standing on the west side there. This is the approximate location of the property, and this is this sewer easement here is really the reason they're before us here. Let's show you the plat first. These are 2 single-family residential lots. They're both zoned SR2, which allows only for detached single-family residences. The zoning is not changing, but the one buyer bought both lots and wants to build a single home across both lots. But these lots have as you see here, an easement for a city storm sewer pipe and an actual pipe going through there. And so to reconfigure this to a single lot and get rid of the easement, they had to replat it. So just going back one here. This is standing on the front of the lots, and this is about where the pipe is. Here you can see the manhole, and then back here there's an outlet where all 4 lots come together to drain the backyards. So the plat will combine these 2 lots, and then the applicant's engineer, Houston Engineering, represented here today by Mr. Brian Pattengale, has worked with the city engineering department on reconfiguring this, providing a new location for the pipe to go off to the west here. And instead of going to the north, there is sufficient room in the existing easements to do that, and thus vacating this easement and removing that pipe at the applicant's expense. So fairly straightforward lot combination here. And again, Mr. Pattengale is here if you have any questions. And staff's recommendation is stated in your staff report and shown on the screen. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, Commissioners.
Any questions for Donald?
Do we have circumstances within the city limits where we've got that large of a lot as a single residential lot?
Well, we have some pretty good size ones down in Crawford Coves. We occasionally find other people doing lot combinations. We did one down in Eagle Valley, and we've done a couple. Yeah, we've done a couple where people just want to build large houses or have additionally large garages. There's no regulation against it as long as they meet the minimum lot area. There is no maximum lot area for these, Commissioner.
Any other questions?
I have a question. So I've noticed there have been a few really large garages that have gone up in North Fargo, in residential areas. And they always seem like they don't fit because they're too big and many times bigger than the house. I was just wondering if there are any kind of regulations as to the relationship of the size of the house to the garage or other buildings in the vicinity.
Well, there are two things. There is a maximum lot coverage. Every residential zone has a maximum lot coverage, which takes the total area of the footprints of all the buildings, can only be a certain percentage of the lot. And then your detached accessory buildings can't be bigger than your house. But usually these are attached garages. I think I know what you were thinking of there, Commissioner, where you have a house that's got a triple or triple and then on one over here or something. Garage, those are all attached to the house though, so other than those, the lot coverage situation, and there's a height requirement too, I don't believe there is any other regulation for garages in relation to the house.
Okay, so you did mention that,
I think some places do, yeah, I don't, it's as long as it's part of the house, yeah.
yeah, so one of the things, that just out of curiosity, I was wondering if the regulations have changed because of the encouragement of, say, mother-in-law houses and that sort of thing, where
Well,
they no longer need to be attached.
that's really a different topic.
It is.
Yeah, because those are generally a separate unit, and then there's, other rental situations that really are outside the scope of what we're talking about here today, just for this subdivision. I don't know if I can give you a short answer here to what you're concerned about here. I understand what you're talking about, but there is our regulation relating to, as you say, the mother-in-law units has to do with the number of people who live in any residential unit. And one single-family house is considered one residential unit. So there's a regulation on the number of unrelated people who can live there.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's the best regulation that covers that, ma'am.
Donald, I have a question
Yes,
about the relocation of the pipe.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's being relocated on the north side to, so it'll run from the south to the west?
Yes, ma'am, it's
Side
going
of the
north.
property?
Yep, it's going north and south here, and it's going to run to the west here.
And
The sewer pipe loops around through Parker Place here. It's actually in the
okay.
boulevard, isn't it?
And how will that impact the owners of the other lots to the,
No, this is required to be entirely on this owner's property,
okay.
not to encroach on it, but still has to tie. In fact, ma'am, probably Mr. Pattengale could answer that. He has worked out the engineering part of this, so if I may ask him to address that.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Yes, we have been working with the city staff on this. Essentially, there's a catch basin that's located at the corner of those 4 lots that sort of serves to drain the rear yard portions of those 4 lots.
Right here.
Right where Donald's pointing on the cursor there. Essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the pipe, leave the catch basin. We'll have to replace the catch basin, but it's going to remain in the same spot. We're just rerouting the pipe to the west, simply so we're not underneath the proposed homeowner's building. So it's still going to maintain the same drainage patterns and existing drainage. It's just we have to kind of relocate that pipe. It's going to be located in an existing city easement for utilities that are located along the rear property lines. The property lines to the south are actually owned, if I remember correctly, are owned by the person who sold the lots to the homeowner as part of their development. So they've been working with us as part of this, and they're in support of us rerouting this storm sewer through that existing easement that's there.
So just to lay that out one more time, ma'am, this is looking at the north to the south here. Again, this is where it is. This is, so that's over here. And so now it's going to be running along this line. You can't really draw perspective in PowerPoint very well, but I did what I could. So this is where that catch basin is, and then it's going to be coming out here into Parker Place here.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Pattengale.
Any other questions for Brian while we have him up at the stand? All right. I'll open it up for public comment. Anybody from the public wish to comment on this? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment. Any additional discussion, commissioners? Are we ready to act?
I move to accept the findings and recommendations of staff.
Thank you. I need a second, please. I have a motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Sherling,
Yes.
Sobolik,
Aye.
Stoffren,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Rosenberg,
Aye.
Tossa,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to item 5A and B, hearing on the application requesting a zoning change from GC General Commercial to GC General Commercial with a PUD.
Yes. Yep.
I was thinking,
That, yes,
okay. Donald, please.
Yes, sir. Commissioners, this is item 5A and 5B. So yes, it goes from general commercial to general commercial with a PUD, which is a different zone, as you are correct, sir. So this location here is Lot 1, Block 1 of the Cedar Crest First Edition. This is 34th Street South and West Track Drive. 13th Avenue South is here. I-29 is here. This property is zoned general commercial. Here's the location here. This property is undeveloped. There are a couple other undeveloped properties here. This is the current Cass County Jail facility. And again, all the businesses on 13th Avenue here that you're familiar with. So this is a little different PUD than your commissioners are probably used to, because a lot of times in the PUD, the planned unit development, the applicant will come and want, numerous modifications of setbacks and height and residential protection standards and so on. This doesn't really have that. This just has a couple things. And when the applicant, Nate Volman, who's with us here today, originally proposed the project to us, he said, well, could we do this in 2 conditional use permits, one for parking reduction and one for household living here, and which would be something we normally do for the general commercial zone, because as your commissioners know, you've often granted conditional use permits for household living in the general commercial zone or limited commercial zone. But since this was a little different project, this is an affordable housing project, the density is a little more than we would usually grant. The location is a little, different than where we usually do this. And the parking reduction, we wanted to tie that more into the overall project. So that's why we asked Nate to reconfigure this as a PUD, which he did, and their applicant here, Mountain Plains Equity of Billings, Montana, here represented by Don Sturhan today, went along with that idea. Just, it requires there to be a little more detail, a little more analysis on the part of both the applicant and staff, and a little more support on the part of the applicant for the requests that are being made. So when you look at your PUD chart there, you'll see there's only 3 things they want to modify. Otherwise, they explain to us that the standards of the general commercial zone and the LDC in general would be met. This is that location, standing out here on 34th and West Track Drive looking northeast. It's pretty wide open there, as you see. Here, interestingly, we're standing along West Track Drive, and as you see, there's not only a bike lane, but there's conveniently a bus stop right in front of this location. This location is intended for 55 and older low-income residents serving that sector of our community. This is a master land use plan. This is the overall general plan of the PUD. An H-shaped building here, surrounded by some landscaping here, parking all the way around on here. It doesn't really show up well in this graphic, but it's all the way around. These are garages here, and there's a border of parking around. These are garages here. There's 23 garages. So the parking reduction request is, these are independent living units. These are apartments, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, as described in your staff report. And so normally for an apartment, we'd have 2 spaces per unit plus 0.25 space for visitors. This cuts the request down to 1.25 spaces. So they provide actually 165 parking spaces. They're actually a little more than 1.25, but those extra spaces can be for staff and additional visitors. And this is a 55 and older. They cite in their statement there that's included in your packet that they've taken a look at the International Traffic Engineers numbers, which is a standard reference in this business, to support their request for just having a 1 space per unit for senior citizen residents. And so that's their support for that. That's also referred to in the staff report. And then The density is the other big number here. We'll talk about that in a minute. We'll just look at the site. These are just, I'm going to quickly, this one was in your packet. These are some elevations provided by the applicant's architect. These are just conceptual here. He may have some additional comments on these, but obviously a 4-story building, very modern looking building. And then we'll look at the location here. You first look at this and you say, gee, this is in a general commercial zone and it's surrounded by industrial and open space here. But in fact, there are a fair number of services here within about 3/4 of a mile. It's about 3/4 of a mile walking distance following the streets over here to Cashwise. The bus line there, which I believe is Route 20, actually takes you a few different places, takes you right over here, takes you down to West Acres Mall. So there is some accessibility, even though it's not, in a downtown, walkable thing location that you might think of. But there really is a fair amount of access here to services one would need, on a daily basis. And then we'll talk about the density. They're requesting a density of 38 dwelling units per acre. And as you know, our MR3, which would be our largest density multi-dwelling zone, is 24 dwelling units per acre, although various PUDs have expanded that considerably to in the 30s before. And the main driver of this, and I'll have the applicant explain this in more detail, has to do with the way that this is supported and financed. And there's an economy of scale involved in this, and he can explain that in a little more detail than that. So staff's recommended motion here is stated in your staff report and shown on the screen. It is a recommendation for approval. And that concludes our presentation. And then I believe, again, the applicant will have some points he wishes to make to the commission as well. Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, any questions for Donald?
I have one question. Donald, thanks
Yes,
for the
sir.
presentation. Would you go back to the aerial map that you had?
This one?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Could you point out where the other residential properties are on this map?
There is, it's on here.
Westgate.
There's a couple right in here on Westgate. Let me go to the zoning map. Well, that doesn't really work. Let me go back to the zoning map. I'll show you why here. Because there is some residential in the commercial that's on West Track, it was right here, and then there's some more residential over here. So, there's not a large amount of residential, down here, obviously, as you know, Commissioner. There's a bit there, it's just apartments, it's a few buildings there. You can see them in the aerial here.
Okay, thank you.
I don't want to go too fast here for you.
I'd also like to ask regarding the bus. Does the bus take that same route back?
I thought about including the bus route map in this presentation, ma'am, and I didn't do it. It does, I believe it loops, but I'm not looking at that map here.
That seems to be important, especially for older people, that they would
Yes.
be able to get back to where they came
Well, yes,
from.
they will get you back somehow, ma'am. I don't know if I don't recall whether it loops or whether it just swings back and goes the other way on that. But, and that would connect you to other routes too, I believe.
Also, the second question, what side does the entrance orient toward?
So this is West Track Drive, so I believe the primary entrance is facing south here, is that correct, gentlemen?
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Donald, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
And forgive me, I know I'm one of the newer members, so I'm still mastering the zoning.
Sure.
Could you expand on, is this considered a healthcare facility? Why is there not a zoning change for this?
Because, well, here's the answer to that. So no, this is a residential facility. The property is currently zoned general commercial, and we, under our code, you can, with the commission's approval, have residential use in a general commercial zone. Another option would have been to zone change it to MR3 and then increase that density as well. That would have been a different option to do. That would also work. You are correct, ma'am. But in this, since since the density they're asking for was beyond the MR3 anyway, and would require your approval for that density, and they still have, even though they don't, this has almost the same, this meets just by its design, I believe they have 33% green space in here, and if you had MR3, you'd have to have 35, so they're pretty close on that. And as is described in the documents provided by the applicant, there are indoor amenities as well for this. So, but again, your plan would work as well, too.
Also, in the printed form here, it's the land use is spoken of as being continuing care. What does that mean? Or should I
That-
forward my question?
I think the applicant should, Mr. Sturhan can take that one.
Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Don Sturhan. I'm with Mountain Plains Equity Group. We're based in Billings, Montana, although we've been doing business in North Dakota since 2003 was the year we were first formed and organized to provide affordable housing in a 3-state region, North Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming primarily. To answer your question directly, this is a senior housing, 55 and up. We really don't have continuing care in the traditional form of, oftentimes you see senior retirement communities with independent living, assisted living, memory care. It's probably an overstatement to say continuing care. We provide certain services to the seniors that are more amenity related, socialization, interaction, activities, things of that nature, but not from a medical health care situation. So that's, if I can bring that statement back in a little bit, this really is an independent facility. Once the residents get to a point where they need more care, assisted living or memory care, then we need to help them relocate to a place that's more suitable.
And you do have those services?
For assisted living?
Relocation?
Yes, we would.
So you have quite a number of services then that you offer the tenants?
That's correct, and we work quite well. This would be our 14th project in North Dakota. We have a portfolio of about 50 properties altogether, and a number of them are senior properties. So we really like to work with the agencies that are pre-existing in a community to provide those services. Sometimes it's financial counseling, helping them to balance their budgets. Other times it's helping them with their medications and their bills and their appointments and so forth. But that is done through other local agencies and our staff at the facility.
Can I ask, with the others that you have built in North Dakota, do they have all these same services, or is this something new to you, or is this kind of service part of what you do?
It's what we strive to do. Not all of our properties have that. We're going more and more to that type of a model because we're finding that the demand is there for that. So we want to be able to offer that to the residents. It's really more of a supportive services is the term, and to offer those types of services to the residents. We don't have the staff that's necessarily trained in that, but others within the organizations, Easter Seals, United Way, other organizations that are located locally do have the access, or the organizations that can fulfill that need.
So then they would be coming into your facility and you would have contracts with them?
Yes. Now, we don't have that planned at this facility right now. We're doing one, we have 2 of them in Bismarck, for example, Sierra Court, which has been operating for close to 3 years now, and Century Cottages, which is a new facility, senior housing, opening up just this month. They definitely have contracts in place for supportive services. We haven't gone that far to this point yet. We're still at the land entitlement phase.
Okay, so are they going to be all the same size, or will there be varying sizes if they're subsidized?
The units?
Yes.
Yes, we have, in this particular configuration of 120 units, it's leaning more heavily towards 1-bedroom units. So we have 74 one-bedrooms and 46 two-bedrooms, but they will all be similar. It's, all the two-bedrooms are going to look alike, yes.
And what kind of prices are you thinking of for rentals?
It ranges anywhere from $600 to up to, I think the most is $795.
Very
So it's-
good.
Yeah, it's actually, it's a very good rate for seniors. We're very proud of that fact.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah,
Rocky?
is there a qualification for being a resident, given the fact that there's a lot of federal and state housing resources going into those for low income?
Yes, in fact, that does drive it. Okay, the primary source of funding for a project like this is the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. It's a federal program through the Internal Revenue Service, the Department of Treasury, actually, Section 42 of the code, for those who are paying attention. But it is in fact a federal program, and in order to qualify, to be eligible to live in a community like this, it's based on area median income of the county. So in Cass County, we would look to the area median income to set the guidelines. If you are at 60% of AMI or less, you are eligible to live in this community. If you are more than that, then you are ineligible, and we can't accept your application.
Rocky.
Thanks, it sounds like an interesting project. I had a question on the location and how you chose the location. What benefits does that provide for you?
Yeah. Thank you for the question, because we do hear that from time to time, and we're very careful about what's the old saying, location, location, location. This particular location appeals to us for a few reasons. I would recognize that it's not ideal. Certainly we'd like to be downtown with this kind of acreage and right across the street from other amenities and so forth, but we do like the way it's situated for access to amenities. The bus stop, I think, is critically important for us to provide seniors with that access. It's one of the things we found in our parking requirements. We find that oftentimes seniors in these communities don't have a car at all. So we appreciate the consideration on the parking requirements. But the bus service and other Ubers and so forth provide them access not far away. So we've got good amenities nearby. Price is always a concern. How do you find 3.5 acres at a reasonable price in a growing community? Because all those things factor into what can we afford. If we're going to put a subsidized housing project together, the economics are going to be critical. And that's my last point. This particular site is not recognized by most people in the community as being in a qualified census tract. And that's a designation set by HUD. And in communities throughout the country, they will designate a QCT, Qualified Census Tract, as a place that provides an economic opportunity for the community. And they recognize that if we could help to spur more development in this particular QCT tract, that's going to be an economic opportunity and boon to the community. So in order to do that, they provide people like us with a 30% premium on our funding sources. So going back to that tax credit program, we now qualify, if we're located in a QCT, for 30% more tax credits. So it really makes the difference in what we're able to do in terms of our economics and providing this facility. That's a big driver. This is in a QCT. It's hard to find a site of this quality in a QCT. So we feel very fortunate that we were able to do that in Fargo.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? See none? I'll open up the public hearing. Is there anybody from the public wish to speak for or against this application? Nate, you've been absent for a while.
I know. I've been on vacation all summer, John. Thanks, commissioners. Nate Volmuth, representing Prairie Ridge and Don. Thanks for having me today. I just want to touch on a couple quick things. I won't keep you longer than necessary. Speak to Rocky's questions. We did talk to the adjacent property owner which is essentially a part of this block. He doesn't have any plans on developing that and or listing or selling it at this time, but he has envisioned that it will be a future multifamily development location. Don and I have talked, and his other partners have talked at length about the location of it, the positives and negatives of it. I think one of the biggest positives of it, other than it's in the QTC, is that I think it'll be a catalyst for this area of town, and I think there's a bit of evidence to that already since this project has come to light in the brokerage community. The property that's highlighted to the northwest has taken notice of this piece of real estate that is potentially going to have a new facility on it, and they've actually came to the table and listed that property for sale as general commercial just recently in the past week. And so I think it's evidence of a neighborhood of Fargo that is in some respects, when you look out your window to the west and you see Century Theater and West Acres Mall and all of the amenities on that side, and you look to the east and it's some of the older part of town and the industrial. I think this is maybe one of the steps in changing the landscape on that side of town. So for those two pieces in regards to the multifamily, the other piece that I'd want to point out is I believe on Fickner, I believe it's on Fickner Drive. Probably 2 years ago, I believe it came through Planning Commission. The Jeremiah program built their new facility, and I believe that went through a similar process. That's probably less than a quarter mile away and kind of on the fringe of this type of a neighborhood. So I think there's a lot of reasonings of why projects like this come to these parts of town. I mean, they're not on the fringes of town. It's a great infill project, and I think it'll be a catalyst to help maybe change the view of what this looks like when you're driving through Fargo.
Any other questions for Nate? Thank you. All right, anybody else from the public wish to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any other additional discussion, or are we ready to act? Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the motion in the staff report.
Thank you, Scott. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we will roll call vote, please.
Stoffren,
Aye.
Tassa,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Sobolik,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Schirling,
Yes.
Rosenberg,
Aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. At least Rocky didn't make a comment that had a home here, in a year or two.
I was thinking it.
Well, I know you were thinking. All right. We're going to move on to our MetroCog presentation. Aaron, are you going to introduce Michael?
I certainly can. Good afternoon. I'm just here to, Donald already pulled up the PowerPoint for us here, so to introduce Michael Maddox with Fargo-Moorhead Metropolitan Council of Governance. He's here today to talk about the 76th Avenue Corridor Study, which is nearing final completion. And this is just an informational item, so we're not requesting any action here today. So with that, I'll hand it off to Michael.
Thank you, Aaron. Good afternoon, commissioners. As Aaron has indicated, the 76th Avenue Corridor Study is drawing to a close currently. It's a study that was started in 2018, so we're on about 2 years in the study now. However, there have been some amendments to the project that have made it last for so long, and as being one of the projects that I'm in charge of at MetroCog, I'm pretty happy that it's ending up, and I'd like to share with you some of the results that the consultants have brought to us so far. At first, though, I kind of just want to back up and make sure, ooh, it blinked. Want to make sure that I kind of get the reason that we started this study. As you all know, the Southwest region is the primary growth region for Fargo, and including the Horus area as well within their city boundaries. As development has been occurring, some of the roadway facilities we know have needed to be upgraded. Knowing that 76 will play an important role in the transportation network in the future, MetroCog wanted to get out ahead of development pressure in this area, and so it decided at this time to conduct a corridor study that was mainly looking at the long-term vision of this corridor. And this long-term vision is extremely long-term. Like in the Southwest Metropolitan Transportation Plan that MetroCog completed in 2016, this looks out to a planning horizon past 2045, when development will likely be down to 100th Avenue. So the socioeconomic data that we imported into our travel demand model pretty much assumes full build out of the Southwest area. And I think this is important because we get a traffic picture of kind of where demand is coming from, who will use this facility, and what they will use it for. So with that, we'll kind of get on the presentation here. I've kind of already explained why the study. Again, we are out in front of development pressure on this study. We want to make sure that we solidify a vision for this corridor. As you know, on either end of this corridor, there are important transportation facilities with the future Fargo-Moorhead Red River diversion. There will likely be a bridge over that facility that will connect into Horus on 76th Avenue. And there's also a possibility for a bridge over the Red River in this location, which has been planned by MetroCog for a very long time, back to when I was a child, probably 30 years ago. So there's been a lot of planning done on this corridor over the decades. And again, we really wanted to create a vision, but we also wanted to create a phased approach for that. So knowing that roadways generally need a 20-year planning horizon, they need to fulfill those needs. We wanted to make sure that a phased approach would be implemented so that we are not wasting investment in our roadway network with just idle lanes sitting there. We know that that's kind of a hot button issue, especially with how we pay for roadways in this region right now. And so we want to make sure that every dollar that we spend on the transportation network is apt for the time and for the use that it will occur in that 20-year time frame of a roadway's life. So just some key takeaways. I've already mentioned the full build traffic volumes are that very far out in the future. We wanted to make sure that we were incorporating multimodal transportation options, so bicycle and pedestrian, transit, and auto. However, we know that this 76th Avenue corridor will likely be a high mobility corridor. We have assumed that there will likely be a large amount of commercial and retail uses along this corridor. We know that there might be a interchange facility with I-29 at 76th Avenue corridor. So we're taking all these things into consideration when we're creating that vision. So I'll kind of just gloss over this side. One of the main things that you do when you start a corridor study is you inventory existing conditions. The two areas that I kind of want to call out on this map is the West Fargo School District is currently building a middle school and high school in Horus, which will be a driver for traffic in that Horus area. There has been conversations over the past couple of years on creating multiple ingress and egress ways out of Horus. Right now, there are just a couple of ways to get in and out of Horus, and we know for the last couple of years there have been some transportation improvement projects that have hampered ingress and egress out of Horus, knowing that they're mostly currently a kind of a commuter bedroom community. And so we wanted to create another avenue, pun on word, a little pun there, to get out of Horus and connect to the jobs and recreation and retail opportunities in Fargo. The other is a potential future school site for the Fargo Public School District that is kind of over in that 25th Street area. As you can kind of, oh, the cursor does work, right here. We did a number of public engagement efforts throughout this corridor study. One of the main things that we did was send out newsletters to everybody who lives a half mile north and a half mile south of this. We also conducted a couple of surveys. As you can see here, respondents, 53.7% live in Fargo and 31.3% live in Horus, and the rest probably live in the county. And so we really wanted to engage the citizens who both live down here and maybe would use these facilities and what they envision this corridor being. As you could see, a lot of people indicated that dealing with congestion is one of their main concerns, and having another avenue in that area that would be a high mobility corridor is of particular interest. There was an exercise that was conducted with the study review committee to look at what future land uses along this corridor could be. We called this a building blocks exercise. And you can see Aaron's there in the background in one of the pictures. We basically looked at what future land uses could be and what those densities were, how access would be derived to those sites, and kind of how buildings could be oriented. As you probably all are aware, MetroCog completed a study called the West Fargo Parking and Access Requirement Study a couple of years ago. I was also the project manager on that, in which looked at how transportation facilities and land use can kind of go together, and how access management can be done, and what the functions of different roadways could be. We carried forward that mantra into this study and came up with two alternatives. Alternative one is a regional arterial. I'll caveat that by saying in this region, there are no streets that could be called a true regional arterial. This is mainly a high mobility corridor with limited access. Mobility and throughput is kind of emphasized. Limited signals, pedestrian and bicycle crossings would need to be grade separated, and looking in that 45 to maybe 50 mile an hour speed limit. Whereas alternative two is more of a traditional commercial arterial. And we have a number of these in our community right now. They use more traditional intersection signalization. Pedestrian and bicycle crossings could utilize those signals in order to get through. But in both of these alternatives, we really wanted to emphasize strong access management principles. There is definitely a right-of-way difference in the two alternatives, as you can see here in this figure, versus the regional arterial versus the commercial arterial. The study review committee also put forward an idea of possibly having linear parks if a regional arterial. This would create a buffer, especially in residential areas where berming and trees could really create that visual and sound barrier for traffic that's moving by. However, that's not necessarily a mandated portion of these cross sections. Really, what I would like to call out is the center median and the width of that center median. In the last couple of years, 52nd Avenue was reconstructed from 45th Street to 63rd, and they used a new intersection type called RCUT, Reduced Conflict U-turn intersections. And those basically are mobility type intersections like roundabouts where traffic is continuously moving and rather stopped at a signal. I won't get into the whole traffic operations. There are less conflict points, and like I said, they tend to move traffic without stopping. And those really are the differences between the two alternatives. One uses more mobility type intersections where traffic, even though maybe moving slowly, continues to progress, whereas the traditional commercial corridor would use more signalized intersections. Knowing one of our principles in our Metropolitan Transportation Plan is to further connective signal technology and create corridor timed movements. Those would likely need to be done in this kind of corridor as future traffic volumes could approach the 40 to 45,000 in certain segments of the corridor. This is one of the preferred access plans that the study review committee and the consultant kind of came up with. As you can see, this is a 6-mile corridor, and access is fairly limited through that corridor, again emphasizing the future functionality of this corridor. Major intersections would be located at the north-south mile lines, and then likely right-in, right-outs or other type of intersections would be located in between those. However, in alternative 2, you can see the signals there pop up. One thing of note is looking at where 76th Avenue would cross I-29, and we'll get into that a little bit later. This study didn't necessarily analyze specific interchange options for that area, rather looking at a principled approach. So a traditional, kind of a more traditional interchange like the one in Moorhead on A Street was utilized for alternative 2. And alternative 1, they tried to play with more free movement interchanges, clover leafs, things that would utilize a collector-distributor system. But I won't get into kind of that boring transportation planning. That really excites me. Rather, I kind of want to move into land use and development as we are in front of the Planning Commission today. There were a number of development schemes that were kind of developed for both alternatives, looking at, I said again, density and the configuration of land use, whether it would face the roadway or face away from the roadway. One of the principles that was forwarded in the Fargo, West Fargo Parking and Access Requirement Study was having commercial retail districts face inward to a local transportation network comprised of collector and local roadways, rather than in some of the traditional commercial corridors where you have a big parking lot in front and the retailer faces towards the roadway. This got a little bit of mixed review from our stakeholders, some of which were developers, knowing that especially commercial developers rely on people seeing their businesses. And so there are ways that other communities have done this that I won't go into. But again, this alternative 1 here looks at how development could be oriented towards that inner collector network. Whereas alternative 2, again, which has similar access, is looking at maybe how development could face the roadway, and it could maybe have more of a direct relationship between the path facilities that would run along the roadway. And if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me at any time. Here we developed fly-throughs, which are still in the draft phase, but I just wanted to share one of the fly-throughs with you. So this is a fly-through of alternative 2 and how it could maybe possibly look. You could see that the roadways or the buildings mainly being 1-story, some large box, maybe some medium box with residential and single family, multiple family residential and single family residential mixed in. And there are a number of other videos that we are developing right now, but they're in more of a draft conceptual stage, and we will be sharing them in a presentation to the City Commission as well. Again, project phasing, we know that the roadway will not be, the full build-out roadway will not be needed on day 1. So there's a project that Cass County is currently looking at paving 76th Avenue from where the Horus project stopped to 45th Street, and from 45th Street to 64th to meet up with the grade separation project that's currently going on. The City of Fargo is currently constructing, and that will likely occur and be implemented by 2022. So there's already projects that are moving forward in connecting Horus with the rest of the community through multiple means. This is just a phasing chart of looking at when things are needed. This is a little out of date. We actually just got a new one today. I didn't have time to update the PowerPoint, but looking at when different types of facilities would be needed. Again, in phase 3, there's an opportunity to maybe expand to a 6-lane divided if needed, and that would be if ADTs go above that 45 or get into that 50,000 range. And with that, I just want to thank you for listening to my presentation today, and I really want to thank our study review committee, of which Aaron was a part, for really doing a lot of work and taking a lot of time. And Brenda was also, Brenda Derrick behind me, was also involved in that study review committee. And they really did take a lot of time to think out in advance of what the vision of this roadway could be. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Quick question. Refresh my memory from attending MetroCog meetings. 64th? 60, is that just gonna be over the interstate?
Currently, there's a project to create an overpass on 64th that will occur here, I believe, next year.
With no access, right, to the interstate?
The city of Fargo is also working with North Dakota Department of Transportation in looking at implementing a interchange at 64th that could occur in the year 2025.
What does
if
that
warranted.
do if we do it on 64th? What happens is the access, would the same access probably be on 76th then too?
I don't really want to speculate the timing of an interchange at 76th, just because it really depends upon the progress of development. And so, especially with the unknowns with the diversion, if the diversion is finished and then all of a sudden all of that land becomes available for development, things could happen relatively quickly that could push forward the need for such a facility at 76th. Right now, we believe that 64th will be the next interchange with I-29. And if development progresses past that in a timely fashion, 76 could also go forward, but it will likely be sometime after 64th Avenue.
And what's happened when you talk about the accesses over the rivers? There was gonna be one on 32nd Avenue. Now that, we've moved, if we're not gonna improve the access at the convent on 52nd, right? I take it we've talked about that at MetroCog before. Does that mean that the viability of having access on 76th Avenue over into Minnesota is, I'm trying to remember, Michael, the conversations that, is there some talk that would go to Highway 75? I mean, is that?
Yeah, there were a number of conversations that I especially had today, and Bob Walton, the district engineer, actually reminded me of the 32nd Avenue discussion.
Oh, yeah.
And he was very adamant that we reserve that land. And as you know, the flood buyouts there, the county did use local funding to buy out a lot of those properties outside of the dedicated 66-foot right-of-way in order that they would not have FEMA flood restriction placed on them, and therefore you could build a bridge facility in the future. Again, this is something that's been studied for a long time at MetroCog. We do think that the need for such a route at MetroCog is warranted. Of course, not at this time, but as development creeps southward, our models right now that we just updated for our MTP show a lot of congestion at the tri-stack right now where I-29 and I-94 meet, and a possible way for people in the south to access the north without going on the interstate could be a possibility. And who knows, once the diversion gets done, or maybe things improve in Moorhead and development speeds up down there. I mean, the future is changing so quickly in this area. It's hard to predict that far out in the future.
When is the 64th complete? Is that supposed to be done next year?
I believe so. Brenda could probably give a better timeline. I know they're still in the design of the facility. I
Because we
believe.
got started late this year, right?
That project will be bid in November by the DOT, and it's a 2-year project.
So 2022?
Yep, the overpass should be done by the end of the year in 2022.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Michael?
Oh, this is just to refresh my historical memory. But wasn't there a bridge planned also at one time for 13th Avenue South into Moorhead?
I believe so. The executive director at MetroCog is Cindy Gray, who actually used to work for MetroCog as one of her first positions out of college. And it said that predated her tenure. And so we haven't found any record of that, but I've heard rumblings that there was a bridge facility that was planned for 13th Avenue, and for various reasons didn't go through. And
Well, it primarily was because people objected to widening the 13th Avenue South.
okay.
But I do remember that they had determined where it was going to come into Moorhead, and that would have worked perfectly. So we don't have enough bridges. I know that's for sure.
That's one of the things that we've looked at in MetroCog is bridge facilities and the spacing of bridge facilities. You know, in downtown we have 3 in 3 blocks, but as you get down south, there's not a lot of avenues to cross the river.
Well, Michael, by the time you retire, maybe there'll be something on 76 going into Moorhead.
What I've heard from predecessors in the profession is that you kind of get one project for your lifetime, and then that gets implemented.
One river crossing. You mean?
Yeah. So I look forward to that.
Okay. Well, thank you. If there's no other questions, thank you a lot for the update.
Yeah, thank you, commissioners.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second? Second. Motion is moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, commissioners.